Lunch once followed a rhythm that every grandmother understood. These meals were not rushed, trendy, or disposable. They were dependable, affordable, and rooted in habit. Each recipe had a purpose: to use what was on hand and keep families full until supper. Today, those lunches are disappearing from memory. In this video, you will spend one full hour rediscovering forgotten midday recipes that shaped everyday life at the table. If you value tradition, practicality, and food with history, it matters that you watch closely. These dishes explain how earlier generations lived, cooked, and survived. Their stories still deserve careful attention. Before noon bells rang across small towns, lunch was already planned. One of the most common plates was creamed chipped beef on toast. It appeared on tables because it was cheap, filling, and dependable. Dried beef kept well without refrigeration and turned a little milk into a full meal. Grandmothers soaked the beef to tame the salt, then tore it by hand. Butter melted in a pan, flour followed, and milk slowly thickened into a smooth sauce. The beef went back in, warming gently until the kitchen smelled rich and familiar. Toast was not decoration. It was the foundation, meant to catch every drop. This lunch mattered during the Great Depression and well into the 1950s. It fed children home from school and men stopping in from field or factory work. No one called it comfort food, but comfort is exactly what it gave. It was hot, soft, and steady, even on difficult days. What made this dish special was not elegance. It was reliability. A grandmother could serve it quickly, stretch it easily, and trust that no one left the table hungry. Leftovers rarely existed, but if they did, they reheated without complaint. Today, creamed chipped beef is remembered mostly as a joke or a military ration. That misses the truth. At the lunch table, it was practical love. It showed how earlier generations turned scarcity into routine and routine into care. Remembering this dish helps explain how families survived, one simple lunch at a time. It also reminds viewers why midday meals mattered. Lunch slowed the day, gathered people, and restored energy. These forgotten recipes deserve attention because they shaped habits, health, and memory. Watching closely means understanding not just food, but the quiet systems that held households together. Across time, these lunches connected generations without ceremony daily. Before refrigerators became common, lunch relied on foods that held overnight without complaint. One such dish was cold meatloaf sandwiches, sliced thick and served plain or with mustard. This was not a shortcut meal. It was planning made visible. Meatloaf was baked the night before, often stretched with oats, breadcrumbs, or soaked bread. Every addition mattered. It made the loaf larger, softer, and affordable. By lunchtime the next day, it had set firmly, making clean slices possible. Grandmothers wrapped it in wax paper, knowing it would hold its shape until noon. Lunch plates were simple. A slice of meatloaf between bread, maybe a pickle on the side, sometimes a smear of leftover gravy if it existed. There was no attempt to hide leftovers. Using them wisely was a skill, not a flaw. This lunch thrived from the 1920s through the early 1960s. It fed school children, factory workers, and farmers alike. It traveled well, stayed filling, and wasted nothing. Every bite reflected yesterday's effort and tomorrow's needs. What gave this meal meaning was continuity. Dinner did not end when the plates were cleared. It carried forward into lunch, linking meals together. A grandmother knew how to plan across days, not just hours. Today, cold meatloaf is often dismissed as boring. That judgment ignores its role. It saved time, money, and energy. It respected ingredients and respected labor. Understanding this lunch explains why families stayed fed during long workdays and tight budgets. It also shows why watching this video matters. These recipes were systems, not just food. They kept households moving one practical lunch at a time, quietly shaping daily life and memory. Long before packaged snacks filled cupboards, lunch often came from a pot already simmering. Bean soup was a weekday standard that showed up again and again on grandmother tables. It was filling, cheap, and patient enough to wait until noon. Dried beans were soaked overnight, then cooked slowly with onion, salt, and whatever meat scrap remained from supper. A ham bone, bacon rind, or salt pork gave flavor without expense. By morning, the soup thickened on its own, rich without cream. It stayed warm on the stove, ready when lunch arrived. This meal mattered because it asked very little and gave a lot. Beans provided protein, broth filled bellies, and bread on the side completed the plate. Grandmothers trusted this lunch because it fed many mouths with one pot and stretched through several days. Bean soup lunches were common from the late 1800s through the 1940s, especially during hard winters. Children ate it before returning to school. Adults relied on it to get through long afternoons of work. No one expected variety. They expected reliability. What made this lunch powerful was repetition. Families knew the taste. They knew the smell. It meant stability in a world that often lacked it. A pot of beans on the stove signaled that the household was holding together. Today, bean soup is treated as a side dish or a diet food. That framing misses its role. It was once the main event at midday, a meal built on patience and planning. Remembering this lunch helps explain why earlier kitchens stayed busy and why watching this video matters. These recipes fed bodies and routines at the same time. They show how simple food kept families steady, one dependable lunch at a time. Before supermarkets offered endless choices, lunch often depended on what bread and eggs could provide. Fried egg sandwiches were a regular sight on grandmother tables because they were fast, filling, and endlessly reliable. When time was short, this meal answered without complaint. Eggs were cracked into hot grease or butter, cooked until the edges crisped and the yolk stayed just firm enough. Bread was toasted or fried in the same pan, soaking up flavor. Salt and pepper finished the sandwich. Nothing more was required. Cheese or onion appeared only if they were already on hand. This lunch thrived from the early 1900s through the 1950s. It fed children home from school and adults stepping in from work. Eggs were affordable and usually available, even in rural homes. Bread stretched the meal and made it satisfying enough to last until supper. What mattered most was speed paired with nourishment. A grandmother could prepare several sandwiches in minutes, keeping everyone on schedule. There was no ceremony, but there was care. Hot food at midday showed attention to routine and responsibility. Fried egg sandwiches also taught balance. Protein, fat, and bread worked together to provide energy without excess. This was practical knowledge passed down through habit, not written instruction. Today, this lunch is often upgraded or rebranded, stripped of its original purpose. In its time, it was not about creativity. It was about keeping the day moving. Remembering this dish explains how kitchens functioned under pressure. Lunch needed to be dependable, not impressive. Watching closely matters because these meals reveal how families manage time, money, and hunger all at once. Fried egg sandwiches were simple, but they held the center of the day steady, one pan and one plate at a time. Before deli counters and packaged spreads, lunch often centered on a mixing bowl and a can opener. Tuna salad was a steady presence on grandmother tables because it was affordable, adaptable, and easy to prepare ahead. It required no stove and very little time. Canned tuna was drained carefully, then broken apart with a fork. Mayonnaise followed, just enough to bind, never enough to drown. Chopped onion or celery appeared when available, adding crunch and sharpness. Salt and pepper finished the bowl. Some households added a splash of vinegar or a spoon of pickle relish, depending on habit. This lunch became common in the 1930s and remained popular through the 1960s. Canned fish was shelf-stable and dependable, making it valuable during uncertain times. Served on bread, crackers, or lettuce leaves, tuna salad stretched easily to feed several people. What made this meal important was control. A grandmother could prepare it early, keep it cool, and serve it quickly when noon arrived. It fit neatly into busy days without demanding attention. Children recognized it instantly. Adults trusted it to carry them through the afternoon. Tuna salad lunches also reflected changing kitchens. As refrigeration improved and canned goods expanded, this dish bridged old habits and modern convenience. It showed how households adapted without abandoning thrift. Today, tuna salad is often reshaped with extras and labels. In its original form, it was quiet and practical. It existed to solve a problem, not to impress. Understanding this lunch helps explain how mid-century families managed food and time. Watching this video matters because these recipes were more than meals. They were systems built on planning, restraint, and routine. Remembering tuna salad brings back a moment when lunch was predictable, nourishing, and steady, anchoring the middle of the day with simple purpose. Long before cartons and drive-through windows, lunch often came from a pot and a skillet working together. Tomato soup with grilled cheese was a grandmother staple because it was warm, predictable, and comforting without excess. Canned tomatoes or condensed soup simmered slowly on the stove, thinned with milk or water depending on the pantry. A pinch of salt and a little butter softened the sharpness. The soup stayed warm, waiting patiently for sandwiches to finish. Grilled cheese was never rushed. Bread was buttered edge to edge, then placed in a pan until golden and crisp. Cheese melted slowly inside, creating a soft center that stretched with each bite. This pairing mattered. The sandwich filled, the soup soothed, and together they made a complete lunch. This meal became common in the 1920s and carried through the 1950s. It fed children on cold days and adults needing something hot before returning to work. It was affordable, repeatable, and easy to scale for many mouths. What gave this lunch strength was balance. It provided warmth, fat, and carbohydrates without waste. Grandmothers trusted it because it rarely failed and required no special planning. Tomato soup and grilled cheese also shaped memory. The smell alone signaled safety and routine. It marked a pause in the day when the outside world slowed briefly. Today, this lunch is often dressed up or commercialized. In its original form, it was humble and dependable. It did not ask for attention. Remembering this dish explains why midday meals mattered. Lunch restored energy and rhythm. Watching this video closely matters because these simple combinations supported families through long winters and busy lives. They reveal how ordinary food held households together, one warm bowl and one crisp sandwich at a time. These lunches carried care, discipline, and quiet love across generations. Before lunch became something purchased, it was often something reused with care. Leftover potato hash was a common grandmother lunch because it turned yesterday's food into today's fuel. Nothing was wasted, and nothing felt secondhand. Boiled potatoes from supper were chopped cold, mixed with bits of onion, and whatever meat remained. Corned beef, bacon ends, or sausage scraps all worked. Everything went into a hot skillet with fat saved from earlier cooking. The potatoes browned slowly, forming a crisp crust that held the dish together. This lunch showed up across America from the late 1800s through the 1950s. It fed farm families, factory workers, and children home at midday. Hash could be stretched, reheated, and adjusted depending on need. One pan fed many without complaint. What made potato hash important was intention. A grandmother planned for leftovers before supper was finished. She knew lunch was coming. The skillet at noon represented foresight, not convenience. Often, a fried egg appeared on top if eggs were available. Bread on the side completed the plate. There were no sauces and no garnish. The flavor came from patience and heat, not additions. This lunch also taught resourcefulness. It showed children that food had a second life and that meals connected across days. Nothing was isolated. Everything belonged to a cycle. Today, hash is often presented as a specialty dish. In its original form, it was everyday survival. It existed to keep bodies working and budgets intact. Understanding this lunch explains how households functioned with limited options. Watching this video matters because these recipes reveal systems of planning and care. Potato hash was not exciting, but it was dependable. It carried families through long afternoons and hard seasons, one skillet at a time, quietly proving that thoughtful reuse could sustain an entire household without waste or excess. Before packaged foods and pre-made lunches, macaroni and cheese was a midday favorite on grandmother tables. This was not the baked, restaurant-style version known today. It was simple, creamy, and designed to feed many mouths with little expense. Dry elbow macaroni was boiled until tender. Cheese, usually sharp or processed for easy melting, was stirred in with a little butter and milk. Salt and pepper completed the flavor. The dish required no oven and could be prepared quickly, making it ideal for busy households. Sometimes a little leftover ham or bacon was added, but it was never necessary. This lunch appeared frequently from the 1920s through the 1950s. It was economical, filling, and comforting, especially in colder months when a warm plate mattered most. Children came home from school knowing they would find a bowl ready, while adults returned from work to a meal that did not demand much effort. What made this lunch memorable was consistency. Every bite was familiar, providing reassurance that midday was a pause rather than a scramble. Grandmothers valued meals that delivered satisfaction without waste. Leftovers, if any, were often eaten cold or reheated, still holding their texture and flavor. Macaroni and cheese also reflected ingenuity. It transformed cheap ingredients into something hearty and palatable. It demonstrated that meals could be both practical and comforting, teaching children early lessons about resourcefulness in the kitchen. Today, this dish is often overcomplicated or turned into a snack food. In its original form, it was a cornerstone of lunch, dependable and sustaining. Watching this video closely matters because it shows how simple, thoughtfully prepared food supported families daily. Macaroni and cheese was more than a dish. It was a symbol of care, consistency, and quiet nourishment, one creamy bowl at a time. Before canned soups and frozen dinners, cabbage and bacon was a lunchtime staple on grandmother tables. It was cheap, filling, and simple to prepare, yet it provided warmth and substance that carried families through long afternoons. Fresh cabbage was chopped finely and sautéed with fat rendered from bacon or salt pork. A pinch of salt and black pepper highlighted the natural sweetness of the cabbage, while the smoky fat added depth. Sometimes onions or leftover vegetables were added, depending on availability. Everything cooked slowly until tender, creating a meal that required little supervision but rewarded patience. This lunch appeared frequently from the late 1800s through the 1940s. It fed children coming home from school and adults working long days in factories or on farms. It was inexpensive yet nourishing, stretching to feed multiple mouths without extra effort. What made cabbage and bacon valuable was efficiency. A grandmother could take inexpensive ingredients, combine them carefully, and produce a satisfying, hearty meal. It reflected a mindset where nothing was wasted and every ingredient had purpose. This lunch also carried subtle lessons. Children learned to appreciate flavors of simple foods. Families shared a table, often talking over the aroma of simmering cabbage. It created routine, stability, and a sense of home in a time when both could feel fleeting. Today, cabbage and bacon is largely forgotten, replaced by more elaborate or processed options. In its original form, it was practical love, a steady anchor in the middle of the day. Remembering this lunch helps explain how earlier generations managed nourishment, economy, and care. Watching this video matters because these recipes were not just meals, they were systems of survival and comfort. Cabbage and bacon showed how simple ingredients, prepared with attention, could sustain a household quietly, reliably, and deliciously. Before modern convenience foods, luncheon meat and mustard sandwiches were a midday fixture on grandmother tables. They were simple, affordable, and quick to prepare, yet they carried the weight of routine and care that families relied on. Cold cuts, often sliced from leftover roasts or purchased sparingly, were layered between bread. A thin spread of mustard added flavor without overpowering the meat. No extras were necessary. Bread held the sandwich together, sometimes buttered lightly to prevent sogginess. This lunch required no cooking, only foresight. These sandwiches were common from the early 1900s through the 1950s. Children packed them for school, adults carried them to factories or fields, and leftovers were repurposed without complaint. Every bite reflected thrift, efficiency, and a household's ability to plan ahead. What gave this lunch value was reliability. It was consistent, portable, and satisfying. Grandmothers knew it could be prepared in minutes, yet it delivered steady nourishment for long afternoons. There was no need for flair. Practicality defined this meal. Today, cold meat sandwiches are often seen as ordinary or even mundane. That overlooks their original purpose. They bridged meals, saved time, and demonstrated a quiet kind of care that fueled families without fanfare. Understanding this lunch explains why watching this video matters. These recipes were more than simple food, they were a structure that held households together. Luncheon meat and mustard sandwiches remind us that practicality, resourcefulness, and daily care can be expressed through a single plate. They show how earlier generations sustained themselves, one thoughtful lunch at a time. These lunches may seem simple now, but each bite tells a story of planning, resourcefulness, and quiet care. From creamed chipped beef to cold meat sandwiches, every recipe carried families through the challenges of daily life. Rediscovering them is not just about food, it is about honoring traditions, understanding survival, and appreciating the rhythm of earlier generations. As you explore these forgotten midday meals, remember that simplicity can be powerful. If you value history, practicality, and comfort, these recipes deserve attention. Keep them alive, one plate at a time, and let the flavors of the past guide today's table.